All right, y'all
So
are recording.
yeah, so I guess since we were gonna get Josh to do the prediction thing, we can do that tomorrow. But let's make this just for the clicks and stuff like that. Because maybe this could still be relevant. What are kind of and Austin, I don't think we've talked in a while. What's kind of been your perspective on this whole on Trump's State of the Union speech?
So I gotta confess, and this is probably like I didn't even know he was doing one until that day. Like it wasn't until that night, and I think I missed most of it. So I really only watched snippets, but like I've seen kind of the reaction to it. Probably the most interesting thing to me was like the big thing that a lot of people I think stood out to a lot of people was where they had to remove that one congressman for like
Oh, Al
I,
Green.
I don't even I know he was like interrupting, but like the only thing I don't really know specifically what he's doing, but I know a lot of people were like, "Why is this dude like waving his cane at like the president and
Yeah, see,
stuff?"
I came in like 30 to 45 minutes in, and so like I missed all that. And even then, like it's always these congressmen from some weird place that you've never heard of. Like Al Green. Like what state is that guy from?
I
You know
couldn't
what I
tell you.
mean? And it's like okay, like who is this person again? You know, and it's like when Marjorie. It's kind of like when Marjorie Taylor Greene did. It's like okay, somebody's just trying to get their name out there. See if some stuff can stick. Trying to get a little bit of money, like all that kind of stuff. And I'm just not here for that crap. I'm like,
The
you know,
one, and speaking of that, like the one, like I've noticed they're really trying to astroturf her, and I really cannot figure this one out. The whole Jasmine Crockett thing,
oh yeah, dude, I
I,
figured that's who you're talking about.
the whole like
She's got
I don't
some
know.
South in her.
Well, she does, but I mean, it's like they just brought her out of nowhere and they're trying to like turn her into like this big thing, and it's just like it feels so forced. You know what I mean? It's
Well,
like
yeah, so she's definitely like that, and I think I looked her up, and I thought she was like on the Harris County, like their city commission or something like that. So like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like and I think there was like maybe she upset someone or, something like that. And so like, I kind of see like when I saw her when I heard that, I was kind of like, okay, they're just trying to do like a trajectory. Like, okay, this girl's doing this. Now she's in the U.S. House. Now she kind of went crazy on someone, so now she's, kind of stepping into more leadership positions and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, like, it's kind of manufactured a little bit, and that's how all those people are.
because like me and you've been around the block for a minute. We kind of remember when like AOC got elected and stuff. That
Oh
that
yeah.
to me felt more like genuine than trying to force her. And then it felt like a lot of this was just like I don't know. It just felt like I mean. And both sides do it, so like nobody get me wrong on this. Like I know that, like it's like you said, like a lot of people do this just to get their name out, but it just felt so like transparently forced that it was kind of like, okay, why are we doing this? This is just stupid.
Well,
And
you
then
also got to remember the big thing with OC was it was an ideological, and she beat like a what's it like? It was almost like a 10, 15 term congressman who
yeah,
was
it
like
was.
very high ranking. Like it wasn't just like, oh, someone
I can't.
flipped a Republican seat or something, you know?
Yeah, I could not remember his name, but yeah, he was like I
I
want to
I,
say like
I
he
was
was like the
listening
top
to her.
30.
She gave a speech or she gave an interview the other day, and like I kind of gained a little bit of respect for her because I was like, okay, like she kind of like seems to know a little bit about what's going on. Only with domestic issues, but I was like internationally, like I don't think she really kind of gets it. Um, but I was like, like she's kind of more kind of like establishment Democrat at this point,
Are you talking about Crockett or AOC?
AOC.
Yeah, I mean she's definitely like I don't know. I've not kept super close track of her career, but like the one thing that like I do think was really interesting from like last year was like there was the Republicans made like huge gains in like New York City, and this was like a big thing at the time. And like they got to looking at it and they're like, okay, there had to have been like a huge number of like people that voted for Trump, but then also voted for AOC on like
Yeah.
like split ticket. And like to her credit, like one thing she did was she held like a town hall specifically wanting to talk to like those voters. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like I she seems like I mean I don't agree with all of her politics. Like don't get me wrong, but it's like at least there is kind of like I'm not sure what the right word for it would be, but there is kind of like
A
a
little
sense
more
of like
genuine.
yeah, that might be it. Because it's like at least you feel like there's something there. But then like Did you see that one really that one really cringe video they put out today where they're like choose your fodder?
No, but one last thing on that. She's going out there and doing town halls all the time. And Josh,
Yeah.
I know he's maybe can't chime in on this. But like people are calling out all these Republicans, like Tim Burchett was one, our congressman, and like people are like, do town halls, and like, AOC's like, I'm doing 20 town halls, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like I see that, you know, um, you know, the thing is with her is it's like she's just kind of changed. Even like physically, like I looked at her and I was like, oh, she's like definitely a little bit older. I think she's like upper 30s or something like that. And like I think it's just kind of a different time. Like I feel like she's kind of still there on all the stuff, but like just like her political influence isn't as high as it used to be.
Well, she's like, I think she got elected like her late 20s because I remember it was like a big thing. She was like this millennial,
Hmm.
getting elected in the 2018 wave. And you gotta like stop and think now that's been like what, 7 years ago now?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, yeah, Tom is there. I mean, too, like, being in DC for a while does change anybody because it's like you do have to
Yeah.
kind of, it's one thing to come in as a firebrand, but if you want to get anything done, you do have to kind of get with the system to a certain extent. And like, but you made the point she's genuine. Where I was going with that a second ago is like, so I don't know if you saw it. The House Democrats put out this video, and you've seen that meme where it's like choose your fodder, and it has that
Yeah.
music playing, and they did that with like their congressman today, and it is as cringe as it sounds. They had like all of them just like choose your fighter, and it was like, I guess it was supposed to be like weird, quirky facts about him, and it was just so like,
Dude, I've said this to people. I'm like, if you were expecting the Democratic Party to kind of get with it socially and culturally, you know, you still got a long way to go. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
Republicans know how to meme and make and do the jokes and like do all that kind of stuff. Democrats just can't do it. Like they just can't put out that kind of content.
I will give some credit though. I don't know if you saw it, but Gavin Newsom did an interview with Charlie Kirk today too.
Oh, did he really?
Yes, that and what was really funny about it was since you mentioned that at one point Newsom's like, yeah, my son was so excited I was going to do an interview with you. He loves watching you, Charlie Kirk. And it's like this is the Democratic governor of California's own son, like preferring to watch like Charlie Kirk over like stuff from his dad's own party. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
funny to stop and think about it like that. But yeah,
Well,
he did like a full
I
on interview with him.
I'm
So I
gonna
mean,
go. I'll
that's
go. I'll find that because I like Gavin Newsom. I think he does a good job of kind of going one extra layer deeper. Like I think he's very good at being like when he did the one with uh Ron DeSantis, I honestly was like hey, like I could kind of see, like I was kind of like, okay, I could kind of see why like Republicans would say X, Y, and Z about this. But I'm like at the same time, like, yeah, I don't really think Gavin Newsom is like I kind of agree with his politics a little bit. So like an example is like the way he's kind of debating the whole people leaving California. And he's like, if you do it per capita, it's not actually that much or whatever. And I was like, like I can kind of see like that's like a good way to look at it. You know what I mean? And just like the way he was kind of like spinning stuff and the way he was kind of debating and trying to get his point across, I was like, he's pretty good at that. Um, I think he's a shitty governor, but
we'll
honestly,
see.
like
Like,
he's doing what he can do,
yeah,
and I'm like, he's also like, as much as they won't say it, they are kind of fucked because they are on that southern border. And I feel like if they were like more inland or something like that, they probably wouldn't have some of the infrastructural issues that they have in their state. Because they do have like a huge undocumented like population over there, don't they?
yeah. I mean, at this point, it's probably like kind of naturally came down just because like we're decades into this, but yeah, and like as far as like the what you're saying about like Gavin Newsom, like there is kind of like a weird kind of like I don't want to say complex because I don't think that's the right like word for it, but there is kind of like a weird maybe fascination I would put it on the right with him because it's like he's clearly left wing, but he's not like he like he's kind of an enigma, almost in a way, because he's not like, I mean, like I say, he's fully left wing, but then he's also willing to like flirt with like Republicans in a sense. I mean, obviously, like doing a long form interview with Charlie Kirk is a great example of that. But like, there was like a big thing. I think it was like last year, the year before last, where like he went out personally in the streets and was like, helping clear up the homeless encampments and stuff.
Mm.
And it's like like, I don't know if he's like, I definitely think he's savvy. He definitely knows how to like be left wing without being like overly left wing. And I think
Well,
if he wasn't like the governor of California with all that would kind of bring with it kind of like a national level. I mean, everybody, California is kind of like Satan's, hell spawn on the
well,
right.
but the thing that I've always heard is that people view California as being very liberal, and like you always hear these crazy laws that are coming out, and it's like, yeah, they get passed through their legislature, but usually the governor doesn't sign them or doesn't really enforce them, and like all that kind of stuff. And so the governors are usually more on the more conservative end of like what the Democratic Party is over there
Yeah.
compared to being this you know so Democratic Socialist or something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they're all kind of more like you know conservative Democrats, but not really conservative. They're probably just more like moderates.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, it
and
kind of
so
makes
like
sense
people
too.
always view Gavin Newsom and like, oh, like look at all these crazy shit that's going on there, and he's like, we're not enforcing any of that stuff, and we're not like, he just has a different relationship with all that.
And that kind of makes sense because like this is a big thing on the right. Like it's also become like a meme now because it's like the joke is like you'll have these like deep red states around these very conventional moderate Republicans for like governor or senator or whatever,
Hmm.
and then like in swing states we always like they always seem to like run like these crazy people to a certain extent. Like
Yeah.
the one that really sticks out in my mind is they ran that guy last year here in North Carolina. I can't think of what his name was for governor.
Oh, the black Nazi.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's become like such a meme because it's like,
Who'd you vote for on that?
no comment.
Yeah, did you really vote for him?
I can't remember honestly. I really cannot remember. I know I didn't vote for the Democrat. I can't remember if I did or I didn't or not.
Really? Okay, interesting.
But
Keep going.
but gosh, where was I going? But yeah, so like the whole kind of thought process behind that is like when you're in like a deep red state, you don't really have to worry about getting like primary because it's like everybody's going to vote Republican anyway. And yeah, but the issue is if you're in a swing state where in order to win like you can't take that risk because you can get primaried by your own voters, so you have to like really appeal to like the base. But the problem is if you really appeal to the base, that hurts you in the general election. So I imagine kind of the same thing applies on the opposite side, and that kind of goes to your point because it's like, if you're running for governor of California, as long as you got that D beside your name, does it, things really
Yeah.
don't matter too much. That kind of makes sense to me because it's like, okay, the governors can be, since it's a statewide office, they can be kind of moderate, and then it's like the real craziness comes from like who San Francisco and Los Angeles are voting for in your state
Well, I was
legislature and
gonna
stuff.
say, I mean, Adam Schiff, the one who ended up taking over for Kamala's seat, he's actually, I think, he's more like a traditional liberal, and
Yeah.
Kamala was actually, she was from more of. I've always heard it's like, okay, where the San Francisco people are always a little bit more liberal, and then
Hmm.
all the Southern California people are more conservative. And
That
so like
makes
Adam
sense.
Schiff is like, I think he's from Southern California. Um,
And what's interesting about that, kind of, because we've talked before about like the shift among Hispanic voters. Like Southern California is very heavily like Hispanic, but then like the north of California is not as much. It's actually kind of more. I would say, I think, especially around the Bay and
Asian.
stuff. Yeah, Asians like especially around the Bay and stuff. So that is kind of an interesting difference to think about it like that.
Um,
Like so, I don't think San Francisco really shifted right any, but Los Angeles did big time last year. So
mhm.
very interesting. Good, good point to make though. Good point to make on that.
Yeah. So for back to the kind of the speech and stuff. Um, I mean, overall, like if you were to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put it as far as like his performance
From
from
what
what
I've
you've
seen,
seen?
from what I've seen, and like this is going to be like an anathema to like probably some of our listeners. I really don't like listening to Trump speeches. They kind of like it just. I mean, they're like if you get the if you get the funny sound bites, yeah, they're great. But like other than that, I'm never. But from like what I've saw was like it was pretty funny. Like the whole thing about like who's ever heard of Lesetho. Like that was
Yeah.
pretty that was pretty funny. And like I've seen a lot of people on like TikTok and stuff post that because they just thought it was funny. And then I think it was CNN did like a polling on it and found like most people approved of the speech, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah,
So
but
it's like
I've heard people say like that's kind of skewed a little bit, and like
yeah,
and
it
being
could be.
like it was like say like 60-65%, and they're like if it's probably more like 55,
Yeah, but I
like
mean like
maybe
even
half and half.
even if it's 55-45, I mean you only need 51 to win. So
Mm.
but I don't know.
Honestly, dude, I love Trump speeches. They're kind of hard to follow,
Yeah, that's my problem. I'm
but
like
because like I remember he was like talking about immigration, and then he went and talked about tariffs, and then he went and talked about hating Democrats, and then he came back to immigration, and I'm like, dude, just talk about immigration, then let's talk about the Democrats, and like just have a little bit better flow, and like I'll say in that speech, like that was kind of tough just to like keep going with.
and that's my issue with it because it's like when it's all over the place, it's just really hard to like.
Yeah.
I'm too ADHD for that.
I'm
But
like,
like,
well, didn't we just talk about this? And I'm like, going, let me get my notes out and go see, like, I'm just, I like listening to his interviews. I think he gives good interviews.
yeah,
Because
I think he's mastered the art of being funny enough to like keep people entertained, and I
yeah,
think it's something like and I just thought about this, and I'm not sure if anybody else has made this point. So this may be like something kind of unique for us. Like he was really good at that in 2016, and he was really good on that last year and into this year, like being funny. I honestly think a big reason he lost in 2020, like if you remember anything about that campaign,
he was too serious.
he was too serious. It was not, and like there, like that was. I remember now, like reading, like that was one big reason they did made such a huge difference with like campaign
Yeah,
staffing this year. Because like
yeah.
back in 2020, they wanted him to try to run as like a normal Republican. Like they were trying to appeal to the suburbs was the big
No,
thing I remember
yeah,
from
I remember. I think it was I always remember it was the first debate he had with Biden. He actually did really bad because he like was not like being aggressive with Biden at all.
yeah.
And so when he was having to sit up there and talk about his policies, like you could tell like that's not wasn't really what he liked doing.
Mhm.
He like kind of just selling it and talking about how bad the other guy is. And so for him, like when he was in there in 2020 in that first interview, he was so reserved and he was not like himself. And I think, and because I was like, most people are going to watch only this interview, and they're going to see that Joe Biden is competent enough to beat Donald Trump, and they're going to vote for Joe Biden. And sure enough, I think that's literally what happened with how many votes he won.
And it's how close it was that year.
Yeah, it was
Like, yeah,
close.
yeah. So I mean, like, I think
Well, hold on. Did he actually lose though?
don't you're going to get us banned like, so fast.
So what?
Like,
I'm curious because what do you think? Because he did talk about that. He kind of talks about it a little bit, like in his speech. He was like, like
I
we had the
think
election stolen and all that kind of stuff.
there's been times he's kind of like more or less admitted like he knows he did lose it, but
Yeah,
like I also feel
I
like
think for
he's
him, he's
just
like, I don't want to go off brand.
yeah. I think too, it's also just like he's so competitive he doesn't want to admit to it because I mean that
Yeah,
was and I mean like. But yeah, me personally, like I never, there was definitely stuff I questioned at the time. Like there's different instances I could bring up, but like overall, I mean, it was just so obvious. And like two, you could just kind of like I'm not like one of those like crystals people, but I do believe like you can kind of get a sense of people's vibes, and then kind of
Mhm.
like last year, like the vibes definitely felt like it was going to be a Republican victory, and then 2020 it definitely felt like it'd be like a Democratic. So I mean, like you can usually tell by vibes.
Yeah.
And like it just at the time you could just tell people were kind of like eh. And then which I mean they better be happy that like they did lose that because I mean if they hadn't on it like we'd probably be looking at like a multi-decade we'd be looking at least a
Oh
couple
yeah, it'd be another kind of like New Deal era kind
yeah
of happening here because
because
it's not because they would have shown they fucked up the
COVID
disease,
yeah
and then they fucked up honestly probably the rollout of the vaccine. I think they would have fucked that one up, and then I think they would have fucked up inflation, They would have gotten hit for that as well, and it would have just been bad. It would have been like Bush '08, or not Bush '08, but it would have been the '08 election, you
Mhm.
know, and
The
they
only
just would have been done for.
the only positive thing I can think of is if they had avoided the Ukraine war, which I think he possibly could
Mhm.
have, but like that would be the only like saving grace for him if they avoided that. But like
Yeah,
the alternate history, not really relevant now.
yeah.
But
Did he talk about Ukraine much in his speech?
I honestly don't know, man.
I don't think I don't think he. I thought that was one where it was like I thought he was saying like he's like I
he
had
did
an
well, no, no,
agreement
no.
or something, but
He
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 didn't talk much about it.
he did make a point of like, and this is something a lot of people like in my sphere kind of known and got angry about. It was like he just in passing mentioned like, yeah, we spent like 150 billion on Ukraine or something, and like the Democrats all started standing up like flying like Ukrainian flags and stuff, and it's like, why like you're not like why are we just randomly cheering this one like portion of the speech and then like I don't know it just for a lot of people in the right it was just like why are you guys like flying Ukrainian flags in Congress like this just doesn't
Yeah.
which like there is definitely like an optics issue for like Democrats. Like I know we've already discussed that, but like the more I think about it, like that speech, it just feels like there was a lot of unforced errors. Like I'm not saying like they could have like if they just did like the whole like the signs and stuff that may have been smart, but I think like the flags, the constant interruptions, and the one that like I've seen a lot of people
The
like
pink jackets and stuff like that.
yeah,
You see
I mean like
them?
even that one
They're
could
like
have been okay
matched.
if it wasn't so obnoxiously forced. Like there's a point of being like making a statement but not forcing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I guess the way that I kind of looked at it was I was like, there's some times where um, you know, yeah, I'd be like, okay, Democrats should stand up for that. You know. But I don't know, dude. I mean, just I think people just are like, fuck Trump. I'm not gonna stand up,
Yeah,
And then I'm like, it probably hurts your knees all the time, so I probably sit down after a few of them.
yeah. And I'm not like I think when we're constantly like standing up and like cheering a president's speech, that seems like
Oh no, I think you should just.
it's
I think you shouldn't talk or do any of that kind of stuff. Like I think you should just sit there and listen to it.
I think until the end, yeah, because it feels very cringe and almost feels kind of creepy in a way when you're constantly like you know And and the biggest thing, I don't know if you saw that, but where they like, I can't remember if they refused to stand for him or if they actually booed him. That kid that like he made like an honorary Secret Service agent.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Kid
That
with
one,
cancer.
yeah, I've seen so many like not even like right wingers, but like a lot of people were like really did not like that. And I mean that's like that would to me was be the biggest unforced error because it's like, dude, it's a kid with cancer. Like that
I
should
know, but
not.
they sit there and here's what they're probably thinking. They're like, there's honestly, I probably like, there's some catch here. Like his dad, maybe
Even
knows Trump or I don't know, dude. Like
even
I
if
would
it
be like,
was,
I'd be like, there's some catch here. Like yeah, like every president should be bringing kids with cancer to go watch his speech. You know what I mean? But it's like you always feel like there's some catch. Like he did all this and now he's the president of the Young Democrats Association or something. Like, oh, okay, we see why you're here.
but
They brought in like some of the 9/11 firefighters. They did all that kind of stuff when they're trying to get that one bill passed. Like
yeah.
they always try to make stuff political, even if it's well intentioned.
Yeah, but it's like even with the firefighters, like I vaguely remember that now that you brought that up. It's like I don't know, man. Like I just think like no matter even if it's a catch, like a lot of normal people just look at it and they're like, dude,
I
that's a kid.
know.
That's a kid with cancer. I mean, come on. And like at least from what I have seen, like on Facebook and stuff, that was something that really riled a lot of people up because it's like,
Yeah.
dude, it's a kid. So I mean, like
So,
just in
but
my opinion, I think that's a pretty big error. But
yeah,
anyway,
but I mean that's always, and that's what
I
I'm
mean,
like
yeah,
when they're talking like when leadership has to be like there's going to be disruption, there's going to be this. I'm like that's like telling someone's like, "All right, son, behave at the neighbor's house." You know what I mean? It's like you shouldn't have to tell your people to do that. And so like to me that also kind of showed that there was like really a lack of cohesiveness on the Democratic side where
big
like
time. That
it
that
wasn't. It wasn't. No one was on the same page. No one's coordinating anything. Um, and then like people talked about Slotkin, being a CIA agent, and now she's up there, giving the counter to Trump. And it's like, okay, like, we they don't really look at stuff very well, and I honestly I think it's because they're like, we have no one on our roster that we can put out there to do this shit.
That's a really big thing because I know we've mentioned it before on the show too. Because it's like they're
Like,
they
here's the question: who's the senator from Rhode Island?
is it. I was gonna say Chris Coons, but I think he's from Delaware, ain't he?
Yeah, he's from Delaware.
I honestly
Chris
don't know.
Murphy is from Connecticut.
Dude, who is from Rhode Island? That's a great question.
Dude, but that's what I'm saying is, like, we don't know any of those people. You know what I mean? Like, and that's
Yeah.
where all that those Democratic senators are. It's like, okay, the big ones, and like maybe, you know, New York, and
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
Connecticut and
basically,
Chris Murphy, and it's like, you don't really know a lot of those people up there. They don't have
and
name ID.
yeah, and like where you were going with that a second ago, which is a really good point. There's really no like leader. Like Nancy
Yeah.
Pelosi's too old now. She really cannot. She's trying as best she can, but like she's not nowhere near as good as she used to be. And I mean,
Well, my issue, and I think I actually was supposed to call him today. Um, there's a Georgia kid who Parker Short, who does a lot of Democratic stuff and Young Dem stuff. I was actually going to call him about something, but one of the things he put up and he would kind of talk about a lot is oh shit, I just forgot what we were talking about. Um, oh damn it, what were you just saying, Austin? Remind me.
oh, we're talking about like the lack of like a national figure to kind of lead the Democrats.
Oh, I know what it was. He bitches just as much as I bitch about how this really shows how fucked the party is. Both the House leader and the Senate leader are from the same state.
I didn't realize that.
And it used to be California and New York. And it's like, okay, like when you really think about it, your leaders should not be coming from your two most powerful states. And now you got Schumer and Hakeem literally in the same metro city. Like, one's not Buffalo and the other one's New York. They're all New York people. That
Yeah,
shows how bad of the state that they are in. Is
but
that
see,
their power is so concentrated,
mhm.
and they have lost, in my opinion, touch with what is needed in swing states and stuff like that, and have gone more towards your Democratic strongholds that you can kind of really maintain control over the party there
Well, I
and
wouldn't
good
even
influence.
I wouldn't even call them Democratic strongholds now, man. New York was
Well,
listed,
yeah, it's getting tough.
yeah,
It's
because
getting
it's
tough.
like New York and like California had the biggest like right. I think I want to say it was New York, California, and then New Jersey, and then I think Illinois had like the biggest like right wing shifts in the
Yeah.
country. And like New Jersey is basically a swing state. Like if that happens again, like that confirms like it they won it by like 5%. That's swing state territory. And
Yeah.
like this is a big thing in the election. Everybody's like, damn, dude, like Illinois and New York were closer than Texas was. Like that's
Yeah.
but and then like you're back to the point like they need to get out there in swing states and stuff. Like there is a real shot that like Democrats could win like North Carolina and Georgia and like make those into like blue states. But like it's like you said, like it just seems like they're very much a rudderless ship at this moment.
Yeah. Well, and it irritates me because it's just kind of like, I'm like, what you have to say is so easy. And I'm like, there's got to be some sort of power politics going on behind the scene that I'm not seeing. Because I'm like, okay, you just tweak your messaging a little bit,
I agree.
right? Like you're always like, Democrats are, they've always been the ones who've talked about reforming government and all this other kind of stuff, and changing stuff up, right? And like doing tax increases, whatever it is. Like, they should be involved in some of these bills, these budget bills that are coming up, and should be actually providing an alternative, being like, hey, instead of this, you should do this. And they just don't do it. And I think honestly they are acting more and more like a minority party, and that's just you know, counter to everything that they've been trying to do. or
Yeah.
want to do.
Well, I
Um,
mean, like a lot of people on the right have taken it to calling it the vibe shift because it just seems like the vibes in the country have just shifted so much into like. I don't want to overstate it because I mean, like it really is not at that point you could say it's like a generational change, but like there is like a sense of like it, like you're seeing a lot of companies now backtrack from like DEI and stuff like that. I mean, like go back to what we said earlier. Like you're now seeing like the governor of California sit down and talk to Charlie Kirk. I mean, and like like certain words that you couldn't say a couple of years ago, you can say now and get away with. I mean, there is like a vibe shift, and I think that's part of what's really hurting them is because like their base obviously will not support that, but
yeah,
like also, but at the same time, it's like if you want to win in the country, you got to meet voters where they are. So it's like, like what's really crazy is like, like, and this is a really good example of that because like Trump's approval rating isn't, from what I remember, it's not that bad of the last one I say. It's kind of 50-50, which I mean, that's for him, that's pretty decent. But like, if you looked at like him on the economy, he's got like I think it's like a +1 approval, which is really bad for a
that's
president.
really bad for a Republican.
Yeah, this early in their presidency, but then you look at his regular approval rating, it's not that bad. And it's like, honestly, I think a lot of it just comes down to like messaging and where people are and kind of like vibes of the country. Cause it's like, I don't know if you remember back, I think it was back in January, they had that poll come out and it's like, yeah, people are kind of like neutral on Republicans, but they absolutely hate Democrats. Like Democrats had like a 30% approval rating. And it's just like,
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of it is. It's just like the country is kind of culturally shifted. It's like, that doesn't mean they're Republican, but it's also just like they really hate where Democrats are at this point.
So what do you I guess like what do you think of like these I guess I guess like I still think Trump's got it. And I think he is still I mean honestly pretty close to the top of his game on selling, or winning elections really, right? And I think about it and I'm like, I feel like we're going to have another shift in how the whole realignment's going to happen. And I think 2028 is going to be the year we see.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of these base voters of Trump, I think are going to be willing to look elsewhere. And I
interesting.
think that's going to be interesting to see who if Democrats pick up.
Well, I mean, like, let's just go ahead and throw it out there. I mean, the fact Newsom's doing interviews with Charlie Kirk tells me he's really, I mean, he's definitely making plays for 2028. And like
Who?
Newsom, like, if he's willing to meet with
Oh,
Charlie Kirk, yeah, that's a pretty clear sign to me. He's thinking
well, yeah,
2020.
and I think he's he tried to go do his radio show, and
Mm.
I'm like he's starting to act like he's Ronald Reagan. You go do your governor thing, and then when you're done, you go do a radio show, and you go
Mhm.
just talk about conservatism and just bitch about the administration, and then you run for president. Like, yeah,
And the
people do that all the time.
and the fact he's willing to reach across the aisle, he's definitely trying to present himself as like a more moderate kind of.
Yeah,
So that's interesting. I mean, I honestly like. I don't know. And what's really funny about that is like, like I said, like the Rot has like a really weird complex with him where they both think he's like evil, but they also kind of like interested in him because it's like he
yeah.
said to,
I think they like respect the game.
he's very complicated. But then what's really funny about it is you talk to Democrats and like especially in like the left wing of the Democrat Party, they absolutely hate Newsom, and I cannot figure that one out.
Really?
Like, from what I've seen, like Democrats really hate Newsom as far as like like really hardcore, like not like mainstream of the party, but like so like that would be kind of funny. Like you're talking about like realignments and stuff. That would be kind of funny to see how that shakes out because it's like, are they going to hold their nose and vote for him, or like and then how many
Yeah.
Republicans going to be, or how many like Trump voters going to be like, I mainly voted for Trump for like the populism. If Newsom's got a decent message and he shows he's a moderate on social issues, I mean, I might give it a shot. And it's
Yeah.
like that.
Well, and I'm also thinking I'm just like, okay, well, you also have Trump voters who just don't go out and vote anymore. I mean, that was also the big thing of the 2024 election. People just came in, voted for Trump, didn't
And
vote
then
for
left,
anyone else.
and then left.
Yeah,
So I
and
mean,
it's like and Democrats were competitive. I mean, they swept North Carolina, you know, and Trump
yeah.
won North Carolina.
So there's a lot
Now
of like
you, I
split.
mean, and they didn't just win. Like I said, they didn't just win governor. They won, I think, literally all the state offices.
Yeah, I think so too, if I'm not
Swept
mistaken.
them. Swept them.
Now,
Um,
as far as like I know we're going to do a prediction episode later, but like just kind of throwing this out there real fast. The interesting inverse of that was Republicans swept everything in Pennsylvania.
yeah,
So I feel like I just kind of like we're talking about like realignments, just real quick to throw it out there because I just think it's so funny. It's like I honestly think we're going to get to a situation where it's like Georgia's going to be a blue state, North Carolina's probably going to be purple, but then like Pennsylvania and New Jersey are probably going to be Republican states. So that'd be kind of funny.
yeah. I don't know, and it's weird because I'm not entirely sure what it's getting on like what lines it's getting divided on. You know, dude, I don't
We'll,
know.
we'll get in when we do our predictions video. We definitely need to talk about that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's
yeah. One thing I just loved watching Trump talk. Like the way he does it, I'm just like,
when he's on his A game.
when he was talking about we spend this much money on circumcisions in Zimbabwe. And then
Yeah,
like one of them, like I forget where it was, but he's like nobody knows where that is.
well, that's
Nobody knows where that is.
that's what I'm
And it's like
yeah.
okay,
That's
like
that's what I meant earlier with that Lesotho. He was like Lesotho. Nobody knows where
yeah,
nobody knows where it is. When he's on his A game, it's really funny, and that's like I feel like it's a very unappreciated aspect of politics. So, like if you can present something in a funny manner, people will like
yeah,
even if they don't agree with it, they'll at least respect you. And I mean, like humor is a really good persuasion tool. Like something I think Democrats have really forgot. One reason they were so good during the Obama era and like how they kind of got to that point back in like the 2000s. Like I know me and you were kind of too young to like really get to watch it or stuff, but like I remember it, like Bill Mayer on like TV,
yep,
like being funny. So I mean, like it's stuff like that. Like and then like I think it was stuff like South Park and stuff like that. Like that was that was back then. I think it was kind of left libertarian, and now it's kind of more I think right coded. But like
yeah.
it's like being funny does when you converts. I just think that's something like they've kind of forgotten, and then like Trump is just like somehow just taps into it. Like I don't know if it's like intentional or if he's just that's just his natural self. But like either way, it's like it's got the same effect. And like
Oh, I mean, Democrats are too serious.
yeah, and
They need to
I,
loosen up a little bit.
I think too, like it. Yeah, we're in like a serious situation as a country, but also just think it's like you you just like maybe not even necessarily too serious, but it's just like it's just like people want an escape to a certain extent, and it's like also it's just like like I said, like there's just something about humor that really is just really effective in like convincing people.
Yeah. Um, I guess like what any other big takeaways from the speech that you can think of?
Really, I mean, I think it's interesting that like he's still like able to hold on to at least like not maybe not a super majority, but like a majority kind of like support. And I think that's kind of something to keep an eye on. I think,
Yeah.
um, really, did he really propose any like huge policy sweeps, or did he more talk about what they've just already done? Like, I can't think there was any like.
Most of what I saw was I mean maybe tariffs a little bit. Was probably like proposed
Which
stuff, but most of it was kind of stuff he had already done. Like, oh, we had cut this, we had cut that, all that kind of stuff.
which to kind of talk about tariffs for a second because I saw a really good take of this kind of as soon as I read it, I was like, that makes perfect sense. So like, obviously he went after Mexico and Canada both, but Sheinbaum at first I thought she was being really stupid, but then like as I've got to paying attention, like she's the president now in Mexico. She's been really smart in how she's handled this, and it's like she'll make a big deal in public, but then she also like in quiet just agrees to everything he asked for. And
Mhm.
like I don't know if you saw this, he carved out a thing on their tariffs where like I think like 95 to 98% of the goods that come from Mexico will be tariffed, and it's really just and like if you notice like whenever he talked, he absolutely hates Trudeau. He keeps calling him Governor Trudeau to like mess with him. But like with Sean Baum, he actually has a lot of respect for. You can kind of tell. Like he'll post like multi-paragraph like, yeah, like we agreed to this or that or whatever, and then like he heaps absolute scorn on Trudeau. I think a lot of it, like somebody made a really good point, was like really a lot of what this seems to be with him is just like he just wants compliance, almost like kind of like a maybe not as like almost like kind of recognizing the hierarchy, just like like okay, look, we're the top dog. As long as you guys know where things are at. Like one of the things Sean Mom agreed was like to cut back ties on China, and it's like okay, that's cool. That's all we really wanted. So whatever. And then like we'll give you this and like whatever. But like the issue with like the Canadians is like they don't seem to get it in the way she got it. And I get it could be like like the different political cultures because like Mexico is very big on like kind of like recognizing kind of plays like that for what they are. So like Trudeau and the Canadians just keep like trying to fight him in public and antagonize him. Then like that obviously sets off Trump's ego, and then it's like he just keeps gunning for Canada. Meanwhile, Mexico is just like smart enough to be like, okay, Mr. Trump will do that, and like okay, whatever. So it really is funny, like because when I read that, I was like, okay, that makes perfect sense because like it really is funny to realize when it comes to tariffs, it's like if they would just shut up, nominally agree to it, and then proceed to do nothing else, he would probably drop it in like a couple of weeks. Like it really is like it's
So
just
did I tell you my take on tariffs and why he's doing it?
no, I like do tell me because like I have talked to some people and I'm curious to see what you think.
So I think part of it is a way to prevent deflation.
Interesting. Okay, that's not completely off base from what
So
I've heard either. So that's really good.
if you remember, I don't know where China's at, but they kind of did the same. They kind of did a similar thing where they started seeing a deflation in their currency because it was super hot during COVID, and as it was kind of coming back to baseline, and that's the last thing you want. Like you'd rather have inflation than deflation. And from what I had heard was that Trump is doing that to kind of keep prices to kind of stabilize prices, because if not, they would actually be going down. And if you look, he's putting these inflationary pressures onto the economy right now, and inflation is kind of stagnant, right? And I think what we're going to see, and we're already kind of starting to see it, is that slowly, maybe every 2 to 3 months, you'll see a rate cut. And so it'll kind of slowly bring it back down to like a baseline. But that baseline is going to be at that 2% that we want it to be. Whereas if we didn't do tariffs, it might actually kind of go into deflationary levels. So that's kind of what I thought it was.
Did I
To kind of get that going.
did I send you that thing where like it was from I think Jim Bianco where he was talking about like the hypothetical Mar-a-Lago Accords.
Mm-mm.
So I do know people that have talked to the campaign. I do know people that have kind of advised them, kind of been associated to them. So I have, we've kind of discussed things and like private and stuff. So a lot of what they're pushing for, from what I have heard and my understanding, and the campaign did put out like some sort of like policy paper, I think back in like November, December. So like they have said some stuff publicly, kind of what the intention is. Like a big thing they want to do is like they want to try to get people to agree to take on 100-year bonds. Like currently most like U.S. Treasury bonds are like 1 year, 2 year, 10 year, 30 year, whatever.
Yeah.
They really want to get a lot of people to switch over to 100-year bonds because that would reduce the interest payments. But there's also kind of like I'd have to read the paper because I read it last week and like I'd have to go back and kind of review it. But like there is kind of like a desire, and then like two, I think I'd sent it in the chat, like our group chat and stuff. Kind of mentioned like they had been signaling they wanted to do some sort of deal with like the Chinese and stuff.
Yeah.
And like I think a really good indicator of that is the fact that like the tariffs they proposed on the Chinese are lower than the ones on the Canadians. But
yeah.
Anyway, so like they're really trying to get some sort of deal to kind of remodify the global economy a little bit. Maybe not. I've heard everything from like, and two, the paper they put out, they kind of suggest that they want to do something like a new Bretton Woods agreement, which I think we've talked about before. Like I've mentioned it before. It was like one thing they were talking about, but they're also like maybe something less ambitious. Like, do you know what the Plaza Accord is from like 1985?
No.
So it was us, the Japanese, and I think some of the Europeans participated, and it was kind of like a, hey, you keep your currency stable around this level or whatever. We do this, you do that. It was meant to kind of stabilize things with like the Japanese, because back then the Japanese were booming, and like so a lot of the tariff stuff, like it's kind of multifaceted. I don't think it's super anything like super hardcore any one way, but like I think overall the point you're making, where like it is trying to like get some sort of stability in like financial market, not maybe
Yeah.
not necessarily financial markets, but like debt markets and stuff like that, and kind of juke things around a little bit. I do think that is directionally correct. I need to sit down because like I talked to a like a friend of mine that like he's advised him, put it like that because I don't want to like say his name and stuff, but like that was one thing like he's talked to him about, and he's kind of, and like the whole point he's made too, it kind of ties in your point with inflation. He's like, Doge is wanting to cut like so much of this and so much of that. He's like, right now federal spending as percent of GDP is 25%. So like if you do make these huge cuts, you cut 2 or 3% of GDP spending. Congrats. I mean, that's a recession, so it's like
Yeah.
you gotta keep that in mind. And then two, it's funnily enough, like I think I sent it to you the other day. The Atlanta Fed tracker is now predicting we're going to see a contraction of like 3%. So I mean,
See, I saw someone kind of talk about that a little bit, and it's almost kind of like, hey, like this is just kind of one study,
which
and kind of being like, well, let's not freak out about this yet. Like
yeah,
we need to see more data.
which
It's
I
kind
which I
of
will
kind of what I
yeah, yeah.
saw.
Which I will say, because like the Atlanta Fed does have a track record of being kind of usually being kind of off, but
Yeah.
like
Well, and it's like, when they do their correction,
yeah,
that's fine. Like, I mean, it's like polls, right? It's like
yeah,
like they're good for directional data of like what's kind of driving change, you know?
exactly, yeah. And then too, in like this context, it's like it does kind of fit, because it's like I am seeing more and more data coming in that's kind of suggesting like, hey, yeah, the economy's slowing down, like whatever. And it's like they could be doing that too, because it's like a big thing. Like this guy I've talked to, he's made the point. He's like, really, when it comes to it, they've kind of got themselves. And it's not just like, this is not just a the new administration. It's like the last several administrations. Like we've seen the debt problem. Like the debt's been kind of becoming an issue for a while now. And like the point he's made is like, they've kind of reached a point. It's like, you know, the thing that made big, like, was kind of mentioned somewhat during the Biden years was like, oh, look, debt as percent of GDP is coming down. It's like, yeah, but that's because you're inflating the debt away. If you're running a deficit of like 3%, but your inflation rate's 5%, yeah, your debt's going to go down a little bit, but it's not, it's because
Yeah.
you're debasing the currency. But, and like his point with that was like, realistically speaking, they're either going to have to hit like some sort of inflationary wave to get the debt down, or they're going to like get a recession to get the same end result. Because it's like, something's got to give one way or the other on this. And he's like, his advice, because I remember me and him talked about it. I think it was like, I want to say December or January. I like asked him, I was like, what have you been telling him? He's like, I've told him like they're really just going to have to eat it in the front end, and then kind of hope, by the time midterms run around, it kind of, it's fixed, kind of pull them. If you remember Reagan's term, that was kind of what happened to him. Like the first like couple of years or so of his first term was like really hold on a minute, his first term was kind of like the first half of it was kind of bad economically, and then it turned
Yeah.
around, and then he turns around and wins 84. So it's like, but like it's I mean, I really sit down and get that, because like I'm trying to remember all of his arguments, because like me and him have talked about this kind of off and on for years, and like I do know other people that are involved, and they're kind of the same mindset on it. So I mean, it is kind of interesting to get their thoughts, and then try to like kind of have an insight to what the internal battles are and stuff. I mean, they're aware of it. I can say at least some of the administration is. I don't know if Scott Bessent necessarily gets it, because he's made so many contradictory statements, which too, that could just be where he's the Treasury Secretary and trying to follow his boss's lead and stuff. I mean, there is kind of limitations on what he can do, but like I can definitely say from like the low to mid level, from what I understand, like people get it. But if that translates into actual policy, I guess we'll see.
Um, with well, I guess I'm just I'm thinking about
I was thinking I'd just bored you to tears for a second.
No, 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 no. Like I guess I was thinking more about the State of the Union. Um,
Yeah, I took that off on a tangent, but like
no,
you made
no, no. I mean, you're good. I'm just trying to see how I can connect that back. Um, one thing that I was kind of been curious about is, you know, how much of who's really kind of pulling the strings, and how much of Trump is pulling the strings of what's going on. You know what I mean? And sometimes I really try to understand that. I try to understand, where Vance is and all this. Who the players are, and honestly, I feel like it's not who I think it would be. I don't even know if it's Elon either. Like I feel like the people who are actually running shit, it's like Donald Trump and like vote, you know, Bassett, um, and uh, I think it was the personnel guy, like all those kind of people. Like they were actually the ones kind of running the country. It's not these other people that we would assume.
Which, by the way, which I'm not sure if this will kind of fit in the context of what we're talking about, but we've kind of danced around it with like Doge and Musk and stuff. So I'm friends with this one guy, and he's got an article coming out. He's a journalist, and like when his article comes out, I'll send it to you. But like the whole point he's made, which was really interesting, and I'm not going to use names because like his article's not come out yet, so I'm not trying to like whatever. The point he's made is like because he's been in DC, kind of like interviewing people and stuff, and his whole point was like, honestly, dude, a lot of this stuff with Doge, like from what he's seeing, he's like, honestly, I think they're really just trying to bust up because like they've really been focused on like GSA and stuff like that, and OPM, just like taking over those, which I remember paying attention to that and was just kind of like, okay, that does seem weird they're putting so much focus on that because GSA is really, I mean, it's not that powerful. It basically just manages like all federal properties and stuff, more or less. I mean, there's some other stuff, but you know what I mean. And then OPM is like personnel management stuff. He was like, the reason like Musk and them and like all these other like tech guys have focused so hard on that is because they're wanting to basically do regulatory capture and then kind of destroy like the regulatory systems that way because they're angling to get like a lot of like if they can kind of weaken or capture a lot of the federal bureaucracy, they can kind of do that, like use that to like get a lot of like God, what is the term I'm looking for? I can't think. Contracts. And like this is kind of like a big thing with Doge. And then he had just told me about that the other day, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And like it kind of made sense when I thought of it because it's like, okay, that explains like why somebody moves with OPM, somebody moves with GSA and stuff, and then like whatever.
So
And
you're
then
saying it is literally naked corruption.
more or less. You're putting it. Yeah, I mean, just call it what it is. And like, it kind of makes sense because I don't know if you remember seeing that where like Tesla got that one contract with the State Department for like armored personnel carriers or whatever,
Yeah,
and like
electric cyber trucks or whatever.
yeah, and like that got shot down kind of fast. And he's like, and he was like, yeah, that was one of the few times they kind of got stymied on that. So he's like, a lot of that is just kind of, and then like there was a thing came out today where like Trump had like an all cabinet meeting and like Musk was there and like it was reported he told him all, he's like, look, Musk doesn't have the authority to fire your people. Like that's he's associated with it, but like he doesn't have the authority to fire anybody. So
Mm-hmm.
so there definitely is some like I guess factionalism. I don't even really know what the term for it would be at this point. Like there is kind of like a weird kind of relationship because it's like you know if Trump's friends with like Musk, because Musk has Twitter, and then like he's kind of cozied up a little bit to like, well, I should say it's kind of been mutual. What's his face, Zuckerberg, has kind of cozied up to him too. I mean, like, if you got Twitter, you got Facebook, Instagram. I know Apple has kind of made some gestures. It's like they're kind of it's kind of like a give and it's a very much give and take thing where it's like yeah, these guys are obviously angling for contracts, and they're also probably like, I don't really want to piss Trump off because like if he comes after me, I'm fucked. Especially like Google because
Mm-hmm.
Google had that antitrust lawsuit, and it's like, yeah. So I mean, so from what I've heard, like that's a huge in battle because it's like you got kind of like almost like the tech right, and in that faction, and then you've got like the more traditional like I know when they sent out that one email. DOD, DHS, State Department, all of them were like, yeah, look, don't reply to that. We do our own processes. It was more or less just telling Elon to, like, F off. So, I mean, like, there definitely is, like, some interesting internal battles going. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like, uh, I can't say anything direct, but I do know, like, there are some interesting indications as far as, like, look, we're kind of, I don't want to say we're doing like a Russia pivot, but where we're trying to get this peace deal and we're kind of, we're trying to normalize relations with them. Like, that's also been kind of like an interesting thing to watch.
Yeah.
Because I do like a lot of, like, it has been kind of almost like a night and day thing, which I mean, the right was already kind of getting to a point where it's like, this is stupid. But like, it's become more in focus. Like, the thing that I noticed today was like, what was it? So like, Eric Prince from like one of those private security firms did like a podcast, almost like a podcast with like this really well known like pro Russia American political commentator. He's kind of Twitter famous. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And there was something else happened that was kind of caught me off guard. And like, it really is interesting to see how things are starting to flip and switch, like in both domestic spheres and also in like international relations and stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and I know we've completely went off tangent, but like you had mentioned that about like who's
No,
in
I
control.
mean, I think the situation with Russia, dude. I'd be honest, like I think there's Democrats that are like, yeah, let's wrap this up. Like it honestly was kind of like, hey, they just kind of need an excuse to do it,
Yeah.
and like I mean, I mean,
Well,
even Democrats that I was listening to were like, hey, like we shouldn't have been arguing about this in public, but being like, but we need to kind of get a ceasefire kind of going here soon. Like that's kind of where most of the Democrats that I heard were talking.
see,
And
what
the
was really
big
great.
question is always, okay, who's getting what? Like that's
Mhm.
that's really the question. It's who's getting the Donbass, who's getting some of these other regions. Like that's what people want to know.
And like part of it too is just like there is kind of like a wider, like like I said earlier, like there's a lot of indications we want to strike some sort of deal with China, like a detente agreement or something. And
Yeah,
then
but I don't understand like having this kind of like three
the
block setup
the
doesn't really make
tripartite.
sense to me.
Well, to, what's really funny? Like, this is probably people are going to get the wrong indication from this, but I honestly thought it was really funny because it's apt. Have you obviously know of 1984 by George Orwell, right?
Hmm.
So in the book, they've got Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia. And like I was talking to a buddy of mine, it's like, really, when you stop and think about it and apply it to this context, that makes perfect sense because it's like Russia is well suited to be the Eurasia, China's obviously East Asia, and then we're well suited to be Oceania. I mean, it kind of makes a certain amount of sense when you look at it from that perspective to me because it's like, yeah, like obviously, like we got an ocean between us and Europe, and then Russia's the most populous nation, so that kind of makes sense why they would be more powerful in like the North Eurasian plain. And then you got China, and it's like it just to me it kind of makes a certain amount of sense. But we could talk about that in the prediction thing. But I was going with that is like it's just interesting seeing like like it's really weird. Like somebody made a point. It's like I saw it was really funny. It's like the Trump administration is like half doing like the most like egregious things possible just to humiliate people, but then it's also like doing the things that JFK got assassinated for. It's like
Oh yeah, 100%.
it really
No, dude, I worry for the guy, and
because
I'll
it's
tell you,
like
dude, after shooting my gun and like going out there and like practicing a little bit, I'm like, I could have made that shot that what's his face didn't make. You know what I mean?
oh,
I'm like,
a lot
I'm
of
like,
people, a
I'm
lot of
like,
people
oh,
got
I could have made that.
that
You
was something
know?
a lot of military guys I talked to were like, dude, like the fact like from that distance, it really
Yeah,
should not. It,
that's like, ooh.
I mean, but it really is funny because it's like yeah, like a lot of this stuff with like it's not going to be an alliance or anything. So, like, I think some people kind of mistook me for arguing for like it would be like an alliance between us and the Russians. It'd be more like kind of like a balance of power. The way I've compared it and when I've talked to people, and it's kind of like if you know anything about like diplomatic history, probably it'd be something closer to like the post 1815, Conference of Vienna. It's called the Concert of Europe. It's where all the great powers got together and they're like, look, like we obviously will probably fight future wars. Obviously, we're not going to agree on our thing, but like let's set up a framework where we can kind of manage this to where it doesn't turn into like another Napoleonic War. And you know that worked for a century. Like from 1815 to 1914, there was no, you know, there was some big wars. I mean, obviously France and Prussia fought, and you know, there was the Crimea War, and then you know Prussia fought Austria to unite Germany. It's like, but there was no like continent-wide world wars again. And it's kind of like, okay, so conference, you know, the Conference of Vienna, the Concert of Europe, whatever you want to call it, it lasted for a century, and then we get two world wars, and then from 1945 until fairly recently, we have the, you know, the post World War II order. And at first, it was us and the Soviets, and then since 1991, it's been us, and it's kind of like, okay, you know, that lasted for about 80 some years. So it's about normal. Usually, you can kind of set up something that usually will kind of last for about a century or so. So it's kind of like, okay, if we're, you know, we're sitting down with the Russians, we're sitting down with the Chinese, and we're like, okay, you know, let's set a framework, because obviously none of us want to fight a nuclear war. None of us really want to fight a world war. And it's kind of like, don't do this, I won't do that. You know, if we do get into like a conflict or something, let's set some boundaries. Like, it makes sense. And I just think it's, you know, like you said, you're worried for the guy. It's like this sort of stuff is like, you know, there is people in the national security apparatus that does not like that. Like, but what's really crazy to me in that sense, you know, we talk about how, you know, demoralized it seems like the Democrats are, like as far as like the national security thing. When all that happened with like Zelensky, which we didn't talk about that. I meant to say we should have done an episode on it, the Oval Office thing.
But you guys got to fucking give me some time.
I mean, shit, you know how we've all been so busy lately. But like, even like, what's his face, Lindsey Graham, and then Dan Crenshaw, like the most neocon of neocons, were like, yeah, you know, Zelensky, that wasn't right. That was, and even Lindsey Graham has made like multiple statements now. He's like, yeah, they should hold elections before we do this or that. So it's like, it's weird how like he's managed to get like the top ones even to kind of like concede on this, because it's kind of like a friend of mine thinks the neocons are starting to lose power in a sense, like just generational turnover. Like the boomers are kind of dying off now, so it's, you know, it's, we're reaching a point where it's mainly going to be like millennials and zoomers and, you know, whatever. So he kind of thinks that's part of it, but it's also just like, I don't know, man. I really do think we, like what I said earlier, it's like it's been almost a century. I mean, you know, we set that up to kind of last as long as it could. It's, you know, it's kind of reached its natural, you know, end point. So now we're looking to set up something else.
I think I'm cool with like reconfiguring the world order. Right, like and I think where I have issues with this whole theory with where you're at is, I think Europe is going to be more independent, but I still think they're still going to be closely allied to the United States. I think that
they probably will. Like,
you've got India, it's like, okay, India, I think it's going to be the exact same thing, right? Where it's going to be like they're going to be allied more towards us, you know, and I think it just kind of misses out on that a little bit. I think that you know, analysis. But I'm not surprised that, you know, we're going to kind of accept not even spheres of influence, but just kind of like we're going to accept kind of a newer order. But you've got to pair that with the economic.
That was the point I was about to make. Like, and it kind of ties into like
you got to have both.
I think that's kind of what they're doing, both, because it's like, you know, like we have like underlying economic issues. We're kind of like, and I think we kind of disagree on this a little bit in the sense that like I think like we are definitely declining, and like I think that's another factor, because it's like, just truthfully, honestly, we just don't have the power anymore to be like the world police like we were, you know, a generation ago or 2 generations ago. So it's kind of like we're kind of prioritizing like, okay, like, you know, China's made a lot of inroads in like South America. So it's like, okay, you know, like we need to prioritize getting our backyard back in order. And like, if that means we have to give up, you know, really, I mean, what's a bigger security issue for the United States? You know, China having influence in Ecuador or Russia controlling some random oblast in Ukraine or whatever. I mean, like, it just kind of cost benefits analysis. And like, and then you pair it with the economic thing, because it's like, we've obviously got a lot of issues. And then too, they would kind of like to, you know, have things kind of like change to a certain extent. Like, China has a deflation issue. Like one way they could fix that is if we come to some sort of a dollar agreement or some sort of agreement on that, because that could help us fix our problems. That could help them fix their problems. Art of the
Yeah.
deal. Everybody kind of gets something out of it, and then you pair it with like this, kind of change thing, like as far as like security agreements and stuff. That too. That like if you've followed like the path like the Ukraine war, that was the big thing the Russians have always been kind of harped on. Was like it's from at least from especially since Putin's Munich speech back in 2007. It's like, a lot of this security orders were built for a different time. It's like now we're in kind of like a different era, and like, we really need to change things to kind of meet this new era. And I think that's kind of like we've kind of reached the point the United States is like, yeah, that kind of makes sense because it's like, I do agree with you. I do think, just realistically speaking, the Europeans will probably end up still kind of more favoring us. And I think, and that just kind of goes back to like,
I don't think that's going to change.
yeah, I don't think,
and I like you said, I think they're going to be a little more independent, and I think they're
like,
going to be a little bit more assertive. But I don't think we're going to be like, okay, like, hey, we're going to get rid of NATO. You know what I mean? Or like any sort of like really, really strong military relationship with them. It's kind of like I heard somebody say this today when they're like, "Oh my God, do you think Trump's gonna pull out of NATO?" And he's like, "No, he would never do that." Like whether or not he will admit it or not, people believe that the United States is stronger in NATO than out of NATO, and so they're like, look, let him bitch about stuff all he wants, but he's never pulling out. And I think that's going to be maintained. Like I don't think there's a reason why someone would say, okay, we're going to pull out of that.
Interesting.
Now I think the big question with Russia is the same question we have with Donald Trump. When their leader dies, aka Vladimir Putin, what's going to happen?
I have theories. I have theories, and like when we do the prediction episode, I'll go over that because like I've talked to some people. I've followed some stuff over there. I kind of think I have a clue, but like,
what do you think?
We should leave the surprise, bro. We should leave it for that way we'll have anybody that listen to this will be like, oh, okay, I gotta listen to that prediction.
So let me tell you kind of where I think.
Okay.
I think if Putin dies, you are gonna have kind of like a Medvedev, someone who was kind of very cozied up to the oligarchs, very heavily involved in all that kind of stuff, but then has had some sort of bullshit political position or something like that before. And I think that's going to be the guy who they're going to kind of like push up to the top.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't think there's going to have a liberal democracy or anything like that.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think that either. I will say I'll save it because like I've looked into this. I've even talked to some people. Like I've kind of, I think it'll interest you. So I'll save that to the end. But like,
well, I mean, you're exciting me. You're tickling me.
So the last thing I'll say as far as this topic is like, I kind of agree with you. I think Europe will stay kind of with us, but I think that's more just because like Europe is just so incredibly weak now. Like they're talking about like this $900 billion agreement or whatever, and it's like there was an article in Financial Times, like I think it was yesterday. It was like, yeah, like Europe needs to cut its welfare state in order to fund this military thing, and it was like a positive article. And it's like, dude, that is an aging continent. Do you really think you're going to get away with cutting like Social Security, like their version of Social Security and stuff? Like they had riots in France, like really bad riots back in like 2018, 2019, if you remember that, the Alavis. And it's like, yeah, dude, I'm sure if you guys all go about cutting your pensions and stuff, I'm sure that'll work out for you. So I mean, I kind of disagree with you as far as like they'll be more independent, more assertive. I just think they're going to get weaker and weaker from here. And I think the whole reason us and the Russians have shut them out so much is just because it's like we've reached the point like it don't really matter what they think.
So did I ever tell you my theory on kind of the evolution of countries and whether or not basically like one thing I think that makes America great, and even some of the South American countries, is they really are, you know, multi-ethnic democracies, like through and through. And basically, what I'm saying is that Europe, we're seeing that with them, and we're seeing that with some of these other countries, where it's like they're getting all this immigration and they're finally, I think, going to start kind of turning the clock and actually becoming a more, you know, multi-diverse democracy. And I think once you kind of make that change where it's not about ethnicity anything or anything like that anymore, I think that they may kind of start kind of having a renaissance. And I think the way they changed the multi-ethnic thing is with these immigrants coming in. So I think those are actually going to be like a potential positive down the road on, you know, the state of play in Europe. So I think they're going to come back. I don't think they're going to keep getting weaker and weaker and weaker.
Interesting. Okay.
But I don't know. I mean, you know, who fucking knows? I mean, you know,
The future, like if you had asked me like a year ago where my thoughts would be, where we'd be at this point, it's so like there's been so many contingencies that like there's even been stuff happen that I didn't expect. Like for the most part, things have kind of proceeded as I thought they would, but like there's been so many like things from left field, like you never know. Like,
yeah.
but like as far as like, yeah, we'll say with the prediction episode, because I feel like you're gonna. I want to have a lot of spicy takes. I think you're going to find
Mm.
interesting and probably like argue with me over. So we'll have
No,
fun with
I'd
that.
be curious. Um,
So like for the prediction episode, like obviously like we probably want to do like domestic politics. We'll probably touch on
yeah.
geopolitics.
No, like create like a list and be like, hey, like I want to see what you all think about this. Like I've kind of already got a few. So like one of the ones that I was gonna ask is like, do you think Trump is gonna give another address to Congress this year?
Interesting. Oh, you're thinking of small stuff. I'm thinking like, okay, where do you think
Well,
like?
I'm thinking I'm being specific. Like,
Mhm.
hey, like, do you think this specific event's gonna happen? Or you could be like, hey, do you think, you know, Ukraine's gonna sign a deal by May?
You know what we should do? Like honestly, we should probably do like a short term. Like okay, like maybe do like a two parter. Like one part's like okay, like what do you think's going to happen in the next like the remainder of this presidential term, and then
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
another one should be like okay, because at that point it'd be kind of more I guess or geopolitics would kind of come out more with it. Be like okay, what do you think's going to happen out to 2050 or something? I think that'd be
Oh,
kind of interesting.
so here's one that I've been thinking about. Do you think that in 20 years or so, we're no longer gonna ask people if they're white and if they're Hispanic or non-Hispanic?
No, because I'll go ahead and answer this one since you brought that up. The next census will specifically have a Hispanic category.
Right, but I guess I'm just saying, in like down the road,
You mean go back
do
to being like, oh, you're just like another version of
yeah.
white?
Well, I mean, like, so, like, the example I guess I'm giving is like, you know, people used to think that Italians weren't white.
I yes. I know what you're doing because this has been something I've talked about a lot too.
And
With like the,
so I'm basically saying, do you think Hispanics are gonna kind of be like that? Or maybe
I think so.
Mexicans or something, you know?
I think so. I
Yeah,
definitely.
I think that's gonna happen. I
I,
think people are gonna stop dividing Hispanics out.
I think it I don't, like, and it may be kind of different for like all Hispanics because they're like there is so many like differences among them, but like definitely like Mexican Americans, like I definitely see it being like an Italian situation.
Hmm.
Like if you look at intermarriage rates alone, like it seems kind of inevitable at this point. Like a really good point somebody had made was like, okay, we talk about this Hispanic shift back in November. Well, he was looking at polling data from like October or something, and he was like, it's kind of interesting. I've noticed like, especially like third generation, they're the generation most likely to be either the children of like an intermarried couple or like they are intermarried themselves, and then they're also like the most like Republican voting demographic among Hispanics. So it's kind of like you're already kind of starting to see like a large amount of just like getting absorbed basically.
So what do you think about white men being the ones who are dating Hispanic women? So like I've got a buddy and he's now, you know, dating a Hispanic woman. And I feel like it's always that. I feel like it's always the white guy and Hispanic woman. and not like the Hispanic guy and the white girl.
What's really funny about that, since you mentioned it, I'm sure if anybody's been listening to the show for more than like a few episodes, they know I'm married to a Hispanic.
Yeah.
But like all of my most of my friends now are dating Hispanics too. Like
Yes.
it's really like it was kind of funny. My wife was making fun of me because she was like, "What is it with like you marrying me that all of a sudden all your friends are like also like dating Hispanic
Yeah.
women?" Or like I had one that just got engaged to his, and it's like it really is interesting. I don't like. There's a lot you can make of it. There's a lot of interesting data you could sift through on that. I think it's you can come to a lot of interesting conclusions on that. Which the
Yeah.
interesting one I've noticed. The big one used to be like white guys, got with like Asian women. That one seems to be declining, and there is some data to kind of back that up a little bit.
Really.
So it seems like that's kind of
Well,
switched.
that might just because of all the people who were marrying the Vietnamese women are
Yeah, I
not
mean,
doing
well,
that
but
anymore.
yeah, that kind of goes back to the point we made earlier. Like, it's interesting. The boomers are dying off, and now we're seeing some big changes in just about everything. Because like that was the big boomer thing, was like they married like a Filipino or something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
now
but I mean, maybe just preferences have shifted to Latinas or something.
could be. But I mean, either way, it's kind of interesting on its own. And
Yeah.
I think it'll have more of a long term political, cultural, and economic effect.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, we can ask those questions, and so you get a list, and
Okay,
I'll get my list, and we'll kind of just start asking them.
and then
Um,
we'll have Josh come in and make more than one
yeah, I was
comment.
gonna say he's gonna make one of those charts or whatever. So,
He
um,
came in. I don't know if you heard him earlier. He came in just like I agree, and like immediately
yeah,
did back. But
um, yeah. So, final thoughts? Any final takes on the Trump speech?
nah, I mean, like it was. I don't like it's like we said. We really can't think of any like super big policy
Yeah,
switches or anything. So I think it was more of kind of like maybe not a victory lap, but it was kind of more like look what we're doing and what we've done. Now it's kind of like instead of kind of be like okay, we're going to do this or that. And I mean,
good move or bad move?
I don't think it'll matter. I mean, most of the polling shows most people viewed it positively, so but not like enough to where it's like transformative. I think it was just like okay, like
Do you
good
think
speech.
he thought he was gonna get some brownie points or something?
Honestly, I just think he likes being in the limelight. Like like he does have an ego, and I think a lot of it is that because it's just like okay, like get out here, make my big speech. People liked it, yay, move on. Everybody forgets about it 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
The biggest thing in American politics people need to remember now is so much of it is performative. So
Yeah. No, I mean I agree, and I guess like with kind of where I'm at with all this is I think I felt like the Trump speech was performative. I think I even tweeted. I was like, if you've never been to a Trump rally, you just attended one. Like I mean, it was the same old stuff.
you know what's really
Um,
crazy?
and then honestly, I think he, like you said, he's still on it. He still's got his game. He's still a little tight on stuff. So, you know, he's in good shape.
He's just said about being a Trump rally. I've never been to one. Have you?
I haven't.
We
There's a
may have
few.
missed out.
There's a few that I've barely missed. Um, but the thing that I also hate about his rallies is he's in the more obscure parts of like Atlanta when he
Hmm.
comes in.
Well, there's
It's
probably
not like when
there's
Kamala
very good
came in, it
reason for
was
that.
well, I know, but like when Kamala came in, it was in like Midtown,
Yeah.
and so like it's like yeah, like that's center Democratic city. But like for me, like okay, if I wanted to go to that'd be like a 30-minute drive.
Mhm.
With where like Trump is, it's like it's like over an hour away. But it's still like in Atlanta Metro. And so when he's like, "Oh, I'm coming to Atlanta," and you look it up and you're like, "Oh, great, that's 45 fucking minutes away." It's like or an hour away. It's like, "Okay, I'm not going to that." Because I've
Well,
thought
see,
about it. I don't mind. I would love to go to his stuff, but I've also heard like it's just like not as fun as it was in 2016.
yeah, like I've heard that a lot too. Like if it's when he's not up there, kind of doing his thing. A lot of times he just kind of drones now, but
Yeah.
whatever. But you mentioned that, and it's kind of funny because like he came to Asheville at one point last year before the hurricane. It was kind of like everybody was kind of like, why is he in Asheville?
Yeah.
Like the what? Like that is besides maybe Winston Salem, that'd be like the one city I would not want to go to as a
Yeah.
Republican in like North Carolina. But oh well.
Well, it's funny because I still remember when he came through Knoxville. in like 2015 to do a speech, and I remember sitting there thinking like he will never win, being like why did I want to go see him? He's never gonna win. No one's ever gonna go. And I think his rally, like not a lot of people went. But then it's like now, like holy shit, if he went in and he could sell a fucking Neyland Stadium if he wanted to, you know what I mean?
Especially in
Um,
Tennessee.
yeah,
Bro,
Tennessee's dope.
Tennessee is like quietly set itself up as like the new Texas. It's actually kind of wild.
Well, and that's what worries me is that I don't know. I don't
Te-
think I don't think Tennessee's economy is diversified enough to kind of make it happen.
well, I mean, the kind of more point I'm making is just how Republicans got. Like, I remember there was some Democratic strategist was like, I really don't understand how Tennessee is becoming more and more like just looking at the data. It's like it's kind of wild because dude, he even won like the Nashville metro area by like double digits. I went and confirmed that. Like, Memphis is now like single digits Democratic, and like there's no other.
Well, and I've always thought, especially at the state level, like they are. I mean, they are the tip. Like they are not Southern Democrats. Like they are city dwelling Democrats, and so like there's not any moderates or conservative Democrats in the Southern states.
Yeah, they
They're
all died out with
all
like Al Gore and stuff.
well, okay. Al Gore was 20 years ago.
That's what I mean. They died out with Al Gore.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, but like you said, like I mean, all the ones in Atlanta are all city Democrats. You know what I mean? And they're all in pretty safe districts.
Yeah.
Same thing with Alabama. Same thing with Tennessee. Same thing with Mississippi. Like they got their one or two and they're good.
Well,
They're
see
not
what
trying to win elections and they're all city stuff, so they're all these more left.
I
Districts.
that's thank you for reminding me of that because that's a really good point I want to make because you brought up like South Carolina, Mississippi, and stuff. There is some interesting demographic switches happening, and like I'll save that for the prediction episode. But like, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening if you're looking at the voting data and like the demographics and stuff like that. It's really like I'm excited to talk about that with you guys.
Okay, sweet.
Let's
Yeah, let's leave it here.
yeah.
Josh, if you can hear us, go ahead and end it. Um, and yeah, we'll end it here. Let's see, guys, leave.
I just want him to come in and say I agree, not
Y'all
knowing.
get All right, end it.